Hello and welcome to another instalment of InRetroSpect Shots. This is the team, myself, Pete Willington, Daniel Frost and Kris Darby, bringing you coverage and opinion of E3.
Hello, I'm not used to speaking to you in such a short period of time. It's not been that long since we last spoke. It's quite weird for me.
It was less than 24 hours ago. 24 precious hours ago. Dan, have you missed me?
Like, you can't even believe.
I can believe it, though. That's the thing.
I've actually been sat here since we finished yesterday, just waiting for you to come back.
Waiting? Okay, yeah. Good. We've all now watched the PlayStation conference that happened at E3, and we're going to talk about it at length, give you some opinion, some views on what we thought, sort of talk a little bit about the games that we saw, and just generally kind of talk about the comparisons between, just a little bit of light chat about between what we saw at the PlayStation conference and what we saw at Microsoft's shindig. So let's get started. The Sony were very smart in that they sort of led, as a lot of these companies do, with platforms that are either on their way out or may as well be. They started off with Vita and PlayStation 3. And with Vita, they were sort of showing, I just want to kind of burn through these quickly, they were showing the new Killzone, which is Mercenary, Tearaway. They talked about God of War HD Collections 1 and 2 coming to Vita, Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2 also coming to Vita, that it was also going to have support from Flower, with the game Flower from our friends at that game company, Dead Nation, and a new episode of Walking Dead. And in fact, it's going to have the entire Walking Dead series. All of that we kind of knew. None of that's new, so no big whoop there. But it's good to see that Vita got a little bit, at least a little bit of a sort of showing, even if there was, no new games for it, really. And PlayStation 3, Jack Tretton was talking a lot about. He was talking a lot about how they were still continuing support of that system in its 7th year. We saw Quantic Dream's Beyond Two Souls, which looks a heck of a lot like... The engine looks so... I'm sure it's because it is probably the engine, but it looks so Heavy Rain. There were, the loading screens, what were clearly loading screens, looked like the loading screens from Heavy Rain, character, face, portrait. There was also Gran Turismo 6 and Kris's favourite Batman Arkham Origins. Grand Theft Auto 5 is getting a bundle with PlayStation 3 and some lovely looking headphones that you'll never wear outside. PlayStation 3 looks really good. Looks like it's getting a lot of support as Sony move their efforts and their concentrations towards the PlayStation 4. So just to kind of recap on that, excited. I mean, we're all PlayStation 3 owners. I'm a Vita owner. Pleased?
I think it just kind of demonstrates the fact that even though they are, especially with the PS3, maybe not so much with the Vita, because I think with the PlayStation 4 could give Vita its second wind. Whether or not it needs it at the moment, I don't quite know, because I'm not a Vita owner. But I think with the PS3, it does definitely show that, yes, it's coming to the end of its life, but still, the games that are coming out look really good. Last of Us really excites me, obviously. Beyond Two Souls, that really excites me. Rain looks really interesting and really kind of... I really like the look of that, and that kind of reminds me of some of the other stuff they've done in the past. So yeah, I think it's nice to see that, yes, it's coming to the end of its time, but it's not gone just yet. And there's still some big hitters left to give it its proper send off.
I also like the fact that, because I've only had a PlayStation 3 for 2 years, and when Jack Tretton said that they were coming up to their 7th holiday season with PlayStation 4, I thought, oh God, how behind the times am I? By that rate, it's going to be 5 years until I get a PlayStation 4. I was kind of getting wary that I'd get to this E3 and think, oh, I'm just going to be ditched while everyone moves on to PlayStation 4. And I feel better than I would if I was an Xbox 360 owner. I've been left with quite a nice selection of games here. The ones you've just mentioned, Dan, but also Arkham Origins. I was kind of I don't know whether it was the quality of my feed, but it didn't look as shiny as I thought it would. I know they've got to be careful because this is set before obviously the first two, so they can't be too advanced with the mechanics of it because that would seem a bit anachronistic. But I really like that grapple gun thing. That looks really cool, where you fire a grapple at an enemy, which shoots out another grapple, which can send them towards the ceiling or to another person.
We all know how much you like a grapple gun, Chris.
I love a good grapple gun, me. So as a PlayStation 3 owner, I feel as if I'm in safe hands. I feel as if I'm looked after. And for Vita owners, it may be on its way out in some senses, but Tretton said that this was supposed to be the ultimate companion device to the PS4. So I think they're very conscious about breathing some more life into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel secure here. I really do. As a PlayStation owner.
As somebody who owns like 2 Vitas, ridiculously, it was good to see that Killzone's coming. That looks kind of cool to me. I'm not a huge Killzone fan, but that looks great. Tearaway, obviously, Media Molecule can do no wrong at the moment. They've kind of got a bit of an unbroken track record. I'm not a huge fan of Dead Nation. Sam and I played it together. It's all right. But Flower, Walking Dead, that sort of thing coming to the system. No, those are good things. And I don't think the Vita's kind of on its way out, but it is being. I think we are going to see a resurgence of it soon, but and these games are certainly an indication of that. But it's in need of a bit of a sort of bit of a resuscitation. But that's neither here nor there, because oh my goodness me, guys, the PlayStation 4 hardware reveal, kapoosh! The drape is taken away, and they show it off, and they go, this is what the PlayStation 4 looks like, and it looks like the PlayStation 2.
Well, it's a black rhombus version of it, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. Do you like this sort of new design?
I liked it. I think it's what I expected. There's a lot of talk of what they didn't announce, and a lot of people saying, "Oh, what does it matter that it doesn't get it?" It doesn't matter. And I think yes, it doesn't matter, but also it's strange to want something. Or to think you want something when you don't actually know what it looks like. And so, I knew I would have wanted in some form a PlayStation 4, but to want something that I don't even know what it looks like is a weird. So it's good to have now that physical representation of this piece of technology that I now covet.
Yeah.
Or do I?
Or do you? I think we'll find out later.
But you can now imagine it in your living room. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Imagine if he brought it out and it was the size of like Deep Blue or something, and it was just like this huge kind of like the size of a fridge in the corner of your room.
It was surprisingly small. I expected it to be bigger.
He was holding it in his hands. I mean, it does look a bit like an old Atari floppy disk kind of thing. But I like it. The shiny mat and the bit of the mat and the shiny kind of trim around the outside of it. I like the look of it.
I think it looks absolutely fine, personally. Again, I'm sort of the same. If I'm perfectly frank with you, I think the Xbox One actually looks a little bit better in the design of it, in the shell. But again, ultimately, it's a thing that is going to stick underneath my television, and I'm hardly going to look at. So
just going to gather dust.
It's just going to gather dust. So then, some bloke. Some guy who is at the top of Sony or something like that wanders out and starts talking about Sony Pictures and Sony Multimedia and TV, and I started to yawn and get really bored by this point. And this is the point in the conference where I started to think, this is turning in some very bad directions, and I don't particularly like.
Are they going to pull a Microsoft on us?
Are they going to pull a Microsoft? And the whole presentation at this point was getting really shifty. The guy just did not seem like he knew what he was doing. He seemed nervous, and it was talking a lot about, we make, just to let you know, we look after musicians and we make films and TV and that'll definitely be on your PlayStation. It was kind of like, well, of course it will be, you silly goose. There was never any thought that it wasn't. And they started going through, television apps and that sort of thing. They started talking about how PlayStation 3 was, one of the, I think it was, they quoted something like they were the number one device for watching streaming content in the living room, which is an impressive statistic. But
Netflix,
it's an impressive statistic when you look at it like that. But when you look at it as people aren't using their PlayStations to play games on, that's a slightly different sort of it's not quite as impressive at that point. I don't know. I kind of feel like that's an interesting enough statistic. Anyway, he toddled off, and then they started saying, well, of course, the system's all about games. And I thought, good, let's start seeing some games. And you know what? They brought some games with them. Do you know what I mean? They
brought quite a lot.
I've got 2.5 pages of notes here.
Yep.
So let's rattle through these. The Order 1886 is oh my word. So it looks
steampunky.
Yeah, steampunky, kind of Dishonored in sort of the late 19th century. It's sort of machine guns plus handlebar mustaches plus Whitechapel in London. That was a location that they referenced in the trailer. Demons, hellspawn, no doubt, and creatures that kind of stalk the night. Looks like it's going to be a bit sort of. This is a phrase that I will keep using and have continued to use. It looks gritty. It looks visceral. It looks, all of these other words that the next gen is. And it looks cool. It looks interesting. And that is, I believe that's Ready at Dawn. Is it that was behind that one? I want to say that's Ready at Dawn, who are approving.
And Santa Monica as well.
Sorry, yeah, and Santa Monica, and obviously both very sort of established studios and publishing houses there. So that's really useful. Did you guys get anything from it?
It reminded me a bit of, and this isn't a criticism of it. I think this is how it could be made better. It reminded me a bit of the really rubbish comic book adaptation of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes.
Where you've got that kind of steampunk Victorian vibe, but it's got machine guns in it. It's got technology in it that shouldn't actually exist. It's ahead of its time. Because there are a few anachronisms in it. I think there was like a subway train above. So I don't know whether there's kind of all these different time periods that are all kind of colliding with one another. But I found it quite an interesting kind of. It was a universe I was kind of keen to kind of know more about. I think it really piqued my interest.
I definitely want to know more about it because, Dan, I've got literally no idea what this game is. Is it a first-person shooter?
I don't ask me. I don't know. From me taking from it, I thought maybe it could be like a third-person kind of fighting game.
Yep.
Maybe because of the name, The Order. You've got people running. Maybe it could be used as a co-op type game. Looking kind of a bit further into that, we're basing this on a pre-rendered video where it didn't show us anything to do with the game other than a setting, basically, and that there are monsters and there are weapons. So this is all complete speculation on our part. And hell, I thought we'd see Shenmue this session, so this E3. So what do I know? You were plumb out of luck, weren't you? I really was. I'm sad for you, really. One game that we do know. One game that is a bit of a known quantity, Killzone Shadowfall. It's the second Killzone game that they showed. The first obviously being on the Vita. This is a PlayStation 4 launch title, apparently. So, as far as I understand, it's set after Killzone 3 a fair amount, and there's a rebel faction of Helghast, who are trying to take over Helghan again, or a planet again, because at the moment, like, human beings and Helghast live side by side, and then some rebels aren't too happy, and I don't know. Yeah, it's a first-person shooter, and it looks very technically impressive, like all of the Killzone games do. I wasn't blown away, but then I don't think anything from Killzone really could blow me away. It's a known quantity. It's got its fans. I'm not necessarily one of them, but I've not played any of the Killzone games until very, very recently, just because they've just been kind of off my radar. And I do quite like them. I like the style of the shooter. It does feel different to different shooters. And I think, for me, yes, it felt a lot like any other Killzone, but it did look very, very pretty. And I think it's really good at showing off. And to be fair, when they launched the PS4, when they showed the video for it there as well, it does really show off the capabilities of the console, and it does really, the graphics, and especially in the backgrounds, look quite spectacular. enough to be like, wow, this is where this is going. And this is a launch title as well. Let's not forget that, because often the launch titles, in hindsight, don't look fantastic when you compare them to what comes towards the middle and the end of a console's lifetime. So I think this, on a graphical point of view, that's what stands out for me, because it's Killzone. It's a first-person shooter. You don't really get what a first-person shooter's like until you get it in your hands. So from an outsider point of view, I just think it looks fantastic, and so it does interest me somewhat.
Okay. Another sort of, slightly known quantity. This is obviously a social driving game, Drive Club. This looks like Gran Turismo with your mates. So, we
covered this yesterday with Forza. I've got no interest in it really. I don't like these sim games.
They are both very similar looking games in so much as they both look like they want to try and replicate the feel of owning a very expensive car and driving it and being part of a large network of races. And to me, that's exciting. I love the fact that Drive Club is going to be a part of PS Plus. When it sort of launches on PlayStation 4, you're going to be able to download the PS Plus edition of Drive Club. We don't quite know what that means, but you're going to get a taste at least. I'm interested in Drive Club. I think any Sony racer is good, and I think that any change from Gran Turismo is even better. I know, Kris, you're not a massive fan of these, so we'll move on to something a little bit more exciting. Infamous Second Son. I could not give a monkeys about this game anymore. I literally couldn't care less about this game until I saw that trailer. And actually, I think this looks absolutely brilliant. This Q1 release for 2014. Kris, are you excited in this sort of parkour with superpowers, third-person action adventure?
Kind of. I was much more impressed by the moments, the actual kind of the cutscenes, the dialogue, the conversation scenes. I found them quite immersive and quite realistic. As for the gameplay and the whole, the reason behind it all, I just don't like the whole Johnny Storm, Human Torch kind of thing vibe. What the bits I like were the drama between the characters. So I think it's a game I prefer to watch rather than play, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I wasn't as excited as a gamer. I was more excited about it as a person who's interested in how the technology itself of the PS4 architecture is evolving.
And I suppose on that note, we'll move on to Knack, which is another sort of, was sort of initially set up as a bit of a tech demo, but it is a full game. I still have no idea what Knack is. It's a third-person action platformer, is it? Is this what it is?
It looks that way, yeah. It strikes me as you always get these things at the start of a console generation. You get certain games that come out with fanfare, and it's going to be the new thing, and it never really takes off, and it kind of just fritters away. And that's what Knack kind of feels like to me. I hope I'm wrong, because it does look like there's a bit of charm to it, and the character of Knack, and in his small state, looks quite charming. I like the look, I like the visual aesthetic of it. But it strikes me as being all style, no substance. From where I stand at the moment, and of course we don't really know. All we know is he gets bigger, he gets smaller, and that's about it.
But there's little things in it though, like I remember there's one line in it where I think he's gotten bigger, but he's made of ice, and he can only remain as big as with the ice for a certain period of time before he melts. So they have thought about certain things in it. I mean, this comes, I think this was Mark Cerny's baby, wasn't it? It was the major kind of game that was debuted at the first kind of reveal of the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, I think
and he worked on Crash Bandicoot. Years ago.
Most famously, he worked on Marble Madness.
Yeah, but Crash. The reason I say Crash Bandicoot is because it's kind of that similar kind of character action kind of platformer.
Yeah.
In the same way that Crash Bandicoot was kind of like one of the forerunners for that on the PlayStation. I don't know whether he's trying to make Knack the same for the PS4. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it felt to me that comparison could ring true. But whether it goes beyond the physics-based engine that they've got there, that kind of how long that you can kind of play with that, I don't know.
Well,
There's much longevity in that.
Something that's definitely a lot more of a tech demo is David Cage's latest.
The wild card.
The wild card. It's The Dark Sorcerer. Now, this was this was put forward as a tech demo. There's a full version of it that apparently is on the show floor at E3. We weren't privy to that as part of the Sony's conference because they wanted to kind of keep things wrapped up for time. Basically, what they wanted to do at Quantic Dream was show how the increased processing power of the PlayStation 4 would be able to render the small movements of a character's face much, much better and much more realistically, and it would allow for much more realistic looking expressions and therefore more sort of relatable characters. I think this is one of those things where there isn't a huge amount that you can talk about it. It looks very impressive. It was not pre-rendered. It was all running on the PlayStation 4 architecture, and that to me made me very excited. But ultimately, and not to be too cruel to Quantic Dream, but they are yet to make a game that is above a 6 or a 7 out of 10 that doesn't, that isn't made better by the fact that their visuals are 10 out of 10. It's a company that hasn't quite found its footing yet with how it wants to tell games in an interesting and unique video game way, rather than trying to be some sort of analogy to films. And so, admittedly, this is only a tech demo, a very impressive tech demo, but it's almost a bit nothing. It's a bit sort of, I don't know where this is leading, and I don't know if it's leading anywhere. So,
I mean, we'll see how Beyond Two Souls fares.
Yeah,
that comes out first, really. But yeah, I think it was just kind of all-star with little substance. Although I did quite like the bit where the sorcerer it gets a bit meta, and suddenly the green screen appears, and he suddenly becomes the actor playing the character who's looking for tips and advice about how to approach the role. And I quite like that bit. But yeah, we'll have to wait, I think.
And Dan, I know that you're a massive fan of these because you're always saying to me, AAA, Pete, I hate it. Indie games was the next big thing. Basically, yeah, they sort of came out. The vice president of, I want to say third-party relations, came out and said, look, check it. We love indies. We love independent game creators, is what they should have said. We love their games, and PlayStation 4 loves their games, and we've got a load of them, and they're coming really soon. And those games are, and I'll just rattle through these very quickly, because again, there's a lot of them. There's Transistor from Supergiant Games, which is the sequel to Bastion, looks very much like Bastion, and wants to kind of tell a story, I imagine very much along the same lines. I personally love Greg Kasavin, he can do no wrong, so I'm happy with that. There's Don't Starve, which is already out on PC, and I should say most of these are already out on PC. Don't Starve is kind of like a roguelike, in so much as you try to survive on an island and you learn and learn and learn more and more and more about the way that the world works simply through death, essentially. That's the kind of teaching mechanic. I've played it a little bit on Steam, and I think it's very good, and I think it will transfer really well to the home console. Mercenary Kings is a shooter game from shooter game. That sounded so like early 90s games journalism then. Shoot 'em up, from the same people that bought you Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, which is an excellent brawling game, and I'm personally very excited to see their take on something that's basically Contra. One that we'll sort of very quickly touch on later, I'm sure, which is the PlayStation 4 version of Octodad.
Oh, yes.
Which is an absolutely bizarre pull, but I really love that. There's the Spaghetti Western isometric shooter Secret Ponchos. There is Ray's Dead. That's Ray, the name, rather than the action. And that's kind of a strategy game in which you need to lead around a bunch of zombies. Feels a lot like Zombie Tycoon on the Vita, or it looks like it might be a lot like that, so that's a little bit strange. And another game that reminded me of another is Outlast, which looks a lot like Amnesia. This looked really good. It did look very good. It's a first-person scare 'em up, let's say. And then another thing that you genuinely will be excited about, Dan, Oddworld, Odyssey, new and tasty.
I did see Oddworld, new and tasty, and thought, oh my god, new Oddworld game, fantastic. Yes, no, oh, hang on a minute.
HD remake.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was literally my thought process.
So that's an HD remake of the groundbreaking Oddworld Odyssey from
which I have to say, looking at it, it looks beautiful, but I don't think it really needed it. I've actually got Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus on my PS3. I purchased them, and they still look absolutely fine. There's no, in my mind, there's no reason for this other than, I think we've discussed before, potentially using it as a method of making money to make a new Oddworld game. Yeah. Which, if that's the case, then I am fully behind it, and HD them all, I say.
Absolutely. And then there is Galaxy, which is a sort of asteroids? It's more sort of like space war, sort of flinging around an area with sort of controlling the physics around your ship. Which you have direct control over, and shooting bad guys and other bits and pieces. It looks like you're sort of like, I don't want to say standard, but it looks like a sort of arcade game of old. That is a lot of indie games, guys. Which of those sort of piques your interest? Obviously, Octodad is Game of the Year for whenever it comes out, and for every year after it comes out.
Yeah, we covered that in episode 18 of Free Play, back in the day.
In
its PC incarnation.
PlayStation don't even know. We were on that way before.
I have to say, the presentation for Octodad did include my favourite line of the entire E3 completely, where and this got whoops from the audience, and for the first time I supported those whooping, where they said, and although it is true to form, there will be no giant crab enemies. So yeah. I was thrilled to bits, as that is my pet hate in all of video games. Crab enemies.
Kaburaphobia.
It was a very smart, actually, just to go on a kind of tangential thing, and I suppose it relates to indies. This is Sony. This Sony is a Sony that would never have made that joke about, because essentially it's a joke about the PlayStation 3, the giant enemy crab meme. But the Sony that released the PlayStation 3 is not the Sony that is releasing the PlayStation 4. It's a completely different wing of Sony of Sony Computer Entertainment that's handling it. It feels like a much more exciting, the fact that there are so many indies here, and again, both the Xbox conference and this one had a big sort of focus on independent developers, but the fact that they were able to make those jokes, the fact that they were able to come out and say, these games are awesome, we want to support these and we want to get them out into the right hands, and these are, they will get their exclusive console debut on a PlayStation. I think that that's really exciting. Octodad is obviously just going to be absolute 10 out of 10, amazing. I'm personally, for me, I'm really interested to see Transistor from Supergiant Games, and I'm especially interested in seeing Oddworld Odyssey, which you touched on, Dan. I do sympathise with you. I do kind of feel like it might not necessarily need an HD version, but I think that those games have a cult status, and I think that it would be nice if they stopped having that cult status and it became a much more sort of widely known quantity.
The fact that these games are actually really good, and because people kind of sometimes when it's classed as a cult classic, that's looked down upon. That it's actually not that. It's actually not a very good game, but people just like it. These were actually great games.
But in terms of the theatre of it all, this was a real highlight of the event. Microsoft did really good in this, where there was that brilliant moment where the camera pans and you see there's a series of screens around this half circle in front of the audience, and there's an indie developer representing each game in front of their screen in this half arch, and it really felt like an ensemble. Microsoft had really thought well about the scenography of their presentation, and it really sent a really strong image to the audience and all the people around the world watching the presentation that yes, we are putting these indie games developers on an even playing field with our mainstream developers. And there was that bit, wasn't there, the fact that they're actually offering developers the ability to self-publish, which is a really big kind of step forward in that kind of territory. Especially
on home console, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think Sony's press conference in that way was really interesting. That layout, I think it was a very. I think everything about that conference was exceptionally well rehearsed and very, very deliberate. Which is a bit of a shame that they had a few sort of technical issues along the way. But I suppose these kind of things happen, and were a bit disappointing. But never mind. Then very quickly they touched on Diablo 3, and the Diablo 3 basically is going to have some exclusive items that will come as loot. You're going to have some bits and pieces from Uncharted and from Journey. I think that's great. That's fine. That's brilliant. Let's move on to something far more interesting, which was Square Enix. And this got a couple of whoops. Again, whooping was a problem, I feel. And we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But, looking at this list, not a minute. So the first trailer that they showed was Final Fantasy Versus 13, which has been in development for years, and it looks like it's an action game set in the Final Fantasy 13 universe. As far as I'm aware, it had all of that Square Enix sheen and all of that Square Enix madness, the sort of high production values of Final Fantasy, and I was very, very excited when there was a moment where the logo for Final Fantasy Versus 13 comes up, and they sort of show it, and they're like, yeah, here it is, guys, it's finally coming. And then they changed it, and they said, no, actually, you know what, this is Final Fantasy 15. I really love the fact that they are continuing that universe into a proper sequel. I love the fact that they are giving the game the time and dedication that something like this and a big budget AAA game needs. And I like the fact that they are taking their time over a genre that they don't particularly do well out in their Japanese studios. This is a big move for the Final Fantasy brand. There's very few action games in that series, and the ones that are games like Dirge of Cerberus, which is one of the worst games ever made. So I'm excited that they do that, and because I know neither of you are particularly big Final Fantasy fans, Kingdom Hearts.
Hang on. I'm not, but
right.
In the same way that I've recently played Killzone, my New Year's resolution this year was to play some games I've never played before. One of them was Killzone. The other is Final Fantasy 13, and I just started it about 2 days ago.
Oh.
So who knows? I could become a Final Fantasy convert. Who knows? I haven't played enough of the game yet to know if I like it. So we'll see.
Well, apparently you need 15 hours to find out whether or not you will actually like it. So
I'll see you next year.
Yep. And Kingdom Hearts 3. This was very warmly received. Kingdom Hearts 3, this will be the seventh game in the series, seventh game in the series, is the fully fledged sequel, home console sequel, to a game that blends Final Fantasy characters with Disney universe, and to great effect. Apparently, I've played, I think, the first one maybe half an hour, very little. It's a sort of more action-y take on the Final Fantasy brand, but not nearly as much as Versus 13 / Final Fantasy 15 seems to be. Great, love it. More games that are available for younger minds, younger players. That's only a good thing, especially with Final Fantasy moving further and further and further into more supposedly mature sort of subjects and themes. For Square Enix to be like, you know what, the younger ones, they don't get so many games, so we're gonna create a game for them.
I mean, that is important with the gaming culture as it is so saturated with your heavy-duty first-person shooters with your grey background and blood spurting everywhere. It's nice to be able to know that there are companies still making these games, and they're not making them just kiddie games.
Yeah, no, these are games that everybody can
These
enjoy.
are proper games which are also suitable for young children.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, obviously people will look at it and say, well, Mickey Mouse is in it, I'm not playing that. But, give it a chance.
More fool them.
Yeah.
And you'll be, since you're now the biggest fan of Final Fantasy ever, Dan, Final Fantasy 14 is confirmed to be coming to both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3. No details, as far as I'm aware, as to whether or not those two games will talk to one another, how that will work, whether or not it will be subscription-based. I will put good money on it being yes, that it will be.
I got really confused with this because just the whole numbering of it, because as I've just started Final Fantasy 13, I'm aware of Final Fantasy Versus 13, then that turned into Final Fantasy 15, and then they announced Final Fantasy 14. I was like, I can't cope anymore.
Well, then you would have gone absolutely crazy a couple of years ago when they announced both Final Fantasy 13 and Final Fantasy 14 in the same breath.
It's a very broad definition of the word final.
Yes, it is. It is rather. So Final Fantasy 14, for those not in the know, is an MMO. Basically, they also have another MMO in Final Fantasy 11, which is still going. So marketplace confusion is not a thing that Square Enix is apparently particularly bothered about.
Clearly not.
Ubisoft, we're up next. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This is more of a known quantity. We've seen a fair amount of it. It is a game in which you are a pirate and also probably an assassin, and you're with Blackbeard and you do piratey stuff and you're on an island and then you're in a ship and then the Caribbean. It looks great. Like I mean, I haven't played Assassin's Creed Revelations or 3 yet, not through lack of trying to, just haven't had the chance really. Good stuff. I hear good things about the ship battles. So more of that should probably be a good thing. You guys like Assassin's Creed, Kris? That seems like a thing that's right up your street.
I tell you what, it's a series I haven't yet tackled yet, but this really, really made me raise that higher in my list of priorities of games to play. I think it just looks really gorgeous. From watching the original earlier Assassin's Creed, this is quite a change in the landscape, isn't it? Really,
definitely.
It's kind of like when MGS2 went from the big shell into the jungle in MGS3.
I was about to make that exact comparison. Yeah, there was a lot of in that video, wasn't there? There was a lot of sort of creeping through the undergrowth.
Yeah, I think and the spectacle of it, as we've all come to see in pretty much nearly all the games in this lineup, it's just utterly enthralling. I mean, this is the console which has brought us a step closer to cinematic quality, hasn't it? Really, and exceeding that in some areas, I think.
Absolutely. There's also from Ubisoft, we got another demonstration of Watch Dogs. So both of these games are cross-gen, Black Flag and Watch Dogs, and
I have to say I'm getting a little bit tired of Watch Dogs.
That is not a good thing.
I'm seeing so much of it, and it's not a case of I'm seeing too much, but I'm just seeing it over and over again, and they're not showing me anything really brand new and really exciting. I remember this time last year when I saw that first demo of Watch Dogs, and it was, oh my god, this looks amazing. I don't have that feeling anymore, and that worries me because I've got a feeling now that it's, I'll get it when I get it. This isn't going to be a day one purchase for me anymore, and it's just I've just been shown not so much too much, but I've just been shown it over and over again. I've become numb to it.
Because they started showing it so early, I think that was always a danger. I, for one, loved the playthrough, the fact that they were showing off lots of different ways to use the sort of hacking technology in the game to great effect, sort of attack your foes, but in very roundabout ways. I thought that there was a moment that was particularly good where you walked into the main character walked into a coffee bar, and on the TV there was a news report saying that, there was a suspect on the loose and this is what they looked like, and it was you. And then the player turned left to see a person also looking at the TV screen, then look at you, and then walk out, and then started to hear them have a phone call, a phone conversation with 911, and the emergency services, not the ex-teen band. And that's an old joke for you. And then you go straight after them, grab the phone, and chuck it out of their hand. Stop it! Don't get on that call. I loved that, because I thought that's you as the agent of action reacting to things very quickly, having to be very much on your game to sort of make significant progress. And whether or not that will translate into the actual game itself, we're yet to see. But I think that could be a really cool game.
Yeah.
As Sam said in the pre-E3 show as well, we still don't know the limits.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah,
it seems open world. As far as I can tell, it's open world, and they certainly are positioning it as such. If it isn't, they have done a very good / bad job of representing what that game is. Another game that is being slightly badly represented is whatever basketball game 2K Games is making. I think it's just going to be called NBA 2K.
NBA.
Whether or not, I think, 2K's got the NBA license again, hasn't it? Yeah. It looks fine. Some basketball guy, they mocapped his head, and he did that stupid bloody thing that teachers hilariously do, where they'll have a television on in the background, and they'll have a conversation with themselves. Oh, look at me. I'm on the television, but I'm not really. I'm in the classroom. Look how clever I've been. Stop it, 2K. Everyone's seen that. That was absolutely the worst, least funny, most awkward thing I've ever seen a basketball player you've paid to promote your game do. It was absolutely awful. That was probably the lowest point of the thing for me. Maybe not the lowest. That's coming up in a moment. But all I wanted to see was the basketball game, and it looks like a good basketball game. Again, I don't care about basketball, but for a basketball fan, I'm sure it's going to be great. But that whole sort of, oh, hey, do you think you can throw down with me in the basketball? No, you're saying that I'm not very good. Ha 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 ha, you must be crazy. Stop it. Right, Elder Scrolls Online is another thing that can be stopped. This is a game that is coming from Bethesda. It is going to be a premium subscription-based MMO in a world where premium subscription-based MMOs do not work. It's going to be coming to your PlayStation 4, and there is going to be an exclusive beta access for, I imagine, PlayStation Plus members. You'll need it anyway to get online. Again, that's a thing we'll come to in a moment. It features Dumbledore as the narrator, as far as I can tell, which is a strange mashup between Harry.
Was it him? I thought it was.
Considering he's a fictional character, yeah, that is a bit weird.
Yeah,
I think you're thinking Michael Gambon.
I think I am thinking of Michael Gambon,
the great Gambon.
But I'm watching the Harry Potter. I'm being subjected to the Harry Potter movies at the moment.
Oh dear.
They're all right. Should we just talk about that for the next half hour?
Should we just
talk about Harry Potter?
I reckon you should watch the Hunger Games. I watched that the other day. That was
that's a really good movie. Actually.
That was so much better than
Can I just say
Harry
right now, this has gone off topic.
Right, okay.
I need to rein you back in because we still have a lot to talk about.
Oh, E3, yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry.
What were you saying, Peter?
Sorry, yes. So Dumbledore's in Elder Scrolls Online. I liked what I played of Skyrim. I liked what I played of Oblivion. I liked what I played of Morrowind. I should also say that all of those games didn't hold my attention for more than about 4 hours. They are perfectly fine games. I wish I had more time to invest in them because I'm sure I would probably like them. This is going to be a sort of combination of that with World of Warcraft, with less good visuals than the actual Elder Scrolls games, probably a bit less of a story, and a lot more of collect 20 rat pelts. I don't know how this is going to work on consoles. MMOs with subscription models traditionally do not work outside of Japan, where they do have relatively successful console MMOs based on large franchises such as Final Fantasy XI and Dragon Quest X, and Phantasy Star. But yeah, for me, Elder Scrolls is a series about telling a massive story. It's not about partying up with people you don't care about. It's about being the hero, not one of many heroes.
They just slap the name on it to sell it, haven't they? Basically.
I don't really know what Elder Scrolls brings to that. Again, it's quite early. I don't want to write it off, but I think everyone else has, so I kind of feel like I'm jumping on the bandwagon with this. I'm kind of writing it off. Here's a game that I don't understand. They finished a lot of the game stuff off with. Mad Max.
I know.
There's a weird pull. This is almost as weird as Octodad. So Mad Max is a game that's, I guess, in development, and they're trying to bring back a franchise that, the defining characteristics of which are amazing leather, some cars driving around a desert, the apocalypse, and also a lead character played by a racist. So,
the reason this is happening now is because they're remaking the film.
Are they actually doing a remake of Mad Max?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Stop,
with Tom Hardy.
Stop the world. I'd like to get off. Can I get off now?
It seemed a bit odd having this as the penultimate game
Why? Well,
of the presentation.
Yeah, it just feels like, this could have been Shenmue 3. Think about it.
How many times will you be saying that now,
Think
Dan?
about how much poop you would have lost if they'd gone, and now Shenmue 3.
They did that thing with the titles like Final Fantasy. Mad Max changed into Shenmue 3.
Yeah, they were like, not really a ridiculous franchise that no one actually cares about in any serious or significant, meaningful way anymore. No. Some other license that arguably is exactly the same. It featured a man that looked a lot like Mel Gibson.
He looked mad.
He had a shotgun, but only one shell in it. And then a man saying, "Kill me," lying on the desert. And then racist Mel Gibson was stood over him and he went, "I'm not going to kill you." And then he got into his car, and then he ran his head over with his car, and then it said Mad Max. And then there was an awkwardly long pause where nobody clapped. Not to continue to keep putting the boot in, but I'm going to keep putting the boot in. What game is this? Is this an open world? If it is, it's going to be a pretty dry, pretty barren open world. If it's not, if it's going to be a cover-based shooter, probably not a lot of cover to base that shooting on.
With one shotgun shell as well.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Is it going to be a driving game? In which case,
It's gonna be the new Driver.
Oh, great.
But Pete, this doesn't matter because the next bit just completely washes over this.
So, let me put an asterisk by what I'm about to say. So, Jack Tretton's like, "Yo, what up?" Swaggers out back onto the stage and is like, haha, quite a few games.
Very happy with himself.
Very happy with himself. He says, "Hello, I'm back again. I'm Jack Tretton." One of the best men in the games industry, because I love him, basically. He's just so swag. He's just like walks out and he's like, "Yo, I'll make the PlayStation." So he goes, we value consumers. So I want to let you know that there will be no secondhand restriction. There will be no restrictions on secondhand games.
Hooray!
Hooray! Everyone
Massive
says.
cheers.
There's a huge cheer. And actually, here we go. Little brackets here. I actually heard a group of supposed journalists, chanting "Sony, Sony, Sony." I heard there is a bit in the audio, if you go back and listen to it, there's a YouTube clip somewhere, where a bunch of people paid to cover video games in a professional manner were going, "Sony, Sony, Sony," at this news. And at that point, I pulled the Glock out of my drawer, put it in my mouth, and got very close to pulling the trigger because I was so flipping offended at how awful that conduct was. But then Jack Tretton says, and there's no online connection required. And I came back and went, all right, I put the gun away. And he said, you get to play your games when you're downloading your games. So I guess streaming through Gaikai. He said, there's cross-game chat. Brilliant. That's a thing that we've wanted for a very long time. I can't tell you, listeners, how long the InRetroSpect team has spent sitting in not lobbies going, can you hear me? He said, you can share your stuff via Ustream. And I thought to myself, I didn't care about this on the Xbox thing 24 hours ago. I don't care about it now. And then he said, oh yeah, and by the way, if you want to play video games online, you'll need PS Plus. But yeah, you'll get some free games too. So the gun went away. So some good stuff there. No restrictions on second-hand game sales. That means that he described it as, you can play that game, you can sell that game to a friend, you can loan that game to a friend, you can give it into a store at retail. They're not going to restrict you. Nah, Sony is not going to restrict you in any way, and there is no online connection. That's great. That's good. That's good for people that want to play their games. Let's say on the example I'm always given is on a special forces base, like an army base, for example. They don't always have internet connections and they can't get online, so the Xbox One has to call in every 24 hours, otherwise you can't play video games. So
I did hear that they may make exceptions in situations like that.
Well,
but if those exceptions exist, then they should be for everyone.
Soldiers running around the Middle East trying to look for a good internet connection with their Xbox in their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I'll tell you what's the real terror. Not getting online and playing Halo. Yes. Thank you to our special forces.
Speaking of Halo, we're moving into Bungie now.
Well, we were just about to, but what I wanted to come back to is breaking news. Jack Tretton has gone on an interview, I believe it's with G4 TV, and he was clarifying what he meant in that very orchestrated PlayStation conference. Because apparently some people might have got the wrong idea about what he said when he meant no second-hand restrictions. What he actually meant was the Sony at a console level will not restrict you what you do with that disc. You will not be charged a fee by them. They will not ask you to check in with their servers every X amount of hours. They will not do any of that stuff. There's also no region locking by and by. However, publishers and developers who self-publish have every power to implement exactly those restrictions. They can restrict you from selling that game secondhand and the other person being able to use it again. They can ask you to log in via internet connection if they desperately want you to. So that's the big asterisk, basically.
They weren't whooping then.
They weren't whooping then because they did it very subtly when they were not in front of thousands and thousands of people, which is a strange move by Sony. I can't fathom why they would ever do that. That is an odd move. To counter that, I would say, technically all of this stuff already exists. So there is theoretically region locking on the PlayStation 3. I believe you can lock a game to a region, though that has been done, I think, once, and I think it's only been done digitally. The restrictions of the second-hand thing, yes, that is new. I suppose you could argue that if you buy anything digitally on PlayStation Network, you can't trade that anyway. So, but yeah, that's down to publishers. So, Depends how much you want to trust EA and Ubisoft and Activision and all those other places as to whether or not you'll be able to use that software ever again, or sell it on, I should say, whether or not you actually own that product. And then the online connection thing, that actually has happened before, and it sparked a bit of controversy. Capcom did it with Final Fight Double Impact, which basically asked you to be connected to the internet to play this single-player game. So this stuff does exist at the moment, and when it has been implemented, it hasn't been implemented very well. So who knows? And obviously, as I say, they snuck out the whole fact that you will also, if you want to play online multiplayer games, you will be required to be a subscriber for PlayStation Plus. But then you'll also get some free games out of it as well. So, and it will cost you less.
Any Xbox fans have been doing that since day dot anyway. So
yeah, yes,
you've always had to do that.
Absolutely. So. But to me, one of the big value propositions of buying a PlayStation was free online, and I do feel like it is a bit of a disappointment that they demand that this is going to happen. But I can also see the benefits. I probably would pay for cross game chat anyway. I probably would pay for, the ability to, buy games if I had to. So that was all good. I just kind of wanted to get you guys' take on that one, just to kind of see where you're sat with it, how that kind of sits with you, because I do feel like at the time everyone was very, very excited, and now I feel like they've taken the wind out of their own sails a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. Yesterday, when they announced it, it was clear cut. It was, nope, you're fine. You can do whatever you want with all your games, and that's what they said. You can do whatever you want. You can keep them forever. You can sell them on. That's not a problem. And now they've introduced this grey area. The difference is Microsoft, they kind of said right from the start that they kind of introduced the grey area right at the start. This morning, I was in kind of no hesitation that I was thinking PlayStation 4 is going to be the way to go, because they've basically gone the other way. The part of that press conference for Sony was quite embarrassing. The fact they may as well just brought somebody out in a costume covered in Xbox logos and beaten him up.
Yeah,
that was basically what they were doing. They may not have said the word Microsoft, but it was everything was all about Microsoft, and they basically just said, this is what Microsoft are doing, we're not doing that. But actually, we are.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of their presentation slides were just quickly rehashed in the 48th hour, basically.
It would be interesting. It'd be interesting to know, I mean, obviously we never will, how much of their strategy has been influenced by the reaction to Microsoft. Because we don't know.
I think also as well, I think they've said this, they've deliberately been quite evasive and just given us this kind of unasterisked version of the presentation, just because there are some people out there that will just read the headline of a newspaper. I mean, I've been on Facebook today, and already there's memes going around with, like, a table comparing Xbox and PlayStation. Xbox restricts this, restricts PlayStation. No this, no this, no this, no this, and it's just basically constriction versus freedom in that kind of very simple binary. And even though we've got this shade of grey, some people won't realise that because they'll be blinded by this Xbox bad, PlayStation good kind of mentality, I think, personally.
The only other thing I think is, of all the problems, I think this is getting quite bad on Sony now. For me, the big problem with the Xbox One wasn't necessarily the pre-owned games. I can understand that. This is developers getting money back for the games that they've made. When I purchase a pre-owned game at the moment, that developer is getting nothing. So I can understand them wanting to get money, and I may not agree with it or may not like it, but I can accept that. My problem is the online aspect of having to check in every 24 hours, or else the console that I've spent £429 on and the game that I spent £50 on won't work. And that's the big thing that for me, Sony, because they're not doing that, and there seems to be no grey area on this, that won't be the case. So basically, if I have a console and I have the game, doesn't matter what happens, I can always play those if I want to. And that's, for me, is the big difference between them now. Because of this grey area that's been introduced now in terms of pre-owned games, that's the big selling point for me, is the not being online all the time and the checking in every 24 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, kind of mixed feelings on all of that, I feel. Certainly nothing to whoop about. What they then sort of brought out was Destiny. And this is the first time that we've ever seen Destiny in the flesh being played. So Destiny, what is this? This is Bungie and Activision, essentially, trying to outdo Halo, and which is obviously Bungie's previous release, probably the series that they're best known for, though obviously Marathon is a big thing for them. Was a big thing for them. And it was a long presentation of this. It was about 10 minutes, in fact. And so it starts off, you're sort of outside this giant wall, absolutely huge. The world is absolutely beautiful. It's so well rendered. Just big and bright and alien almost, but supposedly, I believe this takes place on Earth.
Yeah.
It was, as I say, like really detailed, like lots of excellent lighting effects as you were sort of moving your way into this giant wall, and on the way to inserting yourself into this huge sort of wall, you meet up with a friend. Later on in the demo, another friend would sort of like turn up, and these are all these are multiplayer pals, and it's going to be a sort of cooperative single player multiplayer experience. I think this is going to be an experience that brings a new sort of subgenre to the first person shooter, and I think that's a very good thing indeed. There was a lot of sort of Borderlands-esque, this is the gun that I've just got, look how cool it is, what can I do with it? There's an upgrade path for those guns. There is a lot of, or at least it seems a lot of sort of tactical stuff where you'll have to talk to your friends and say, hit the bad guys coming out of this big tunnel, we need to fire at this dude, and then lay down certain amounts of fire. You'll be reviving your friends, you'll be doing all that sort of good stuff. Like I say, I've kind of got a little bit of shooter fatigue at the moment, but Dan, I know you're a big fan of this kind of stuff. Like, does this tickle your fancy?
When I was younger, I was never a fan of first-person shooters. I really did not like them at all. And the game that changed that for me was the original Halo on the original Xbox. And I have loved the Halo franchise. I've played all the Bungie games. I've not played Halo 4, so we moved on to the new developer. You're right, it does look absolutely spectacular. I get the feeling if I was to play this game, I would spend a good portion of the time when I started playing just basically spinning the camera around, looking around, because it does look absolutely phenomenal. Possibly up there with the best I've ever seen in any kind of gaming. And I'm playing Final Fantasy. But yeah, and as I said, yes, we said in the last show about Xbox about things about Battlefield. It's very difficult to tell with a first-person shooter because a lot of it's down to the narrative. And I have to say, the narrative for Halo was in the upper echelons of other first-person shooters, and what they tried to do with their narrative was really interesting. And they clearly don't look at it just in a gameplay perspective; they look at the whole package. And with the toys that they've now got to play with from PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Activision, what they've been given, this could be pretty special. I'm not so sure about, because I know they've talked a lot about the multiplayer aspects, and I know they've got big plans for this, and I don't really understand what those big plans are. So there's still a bit more to learn about it, but I think it looks very exciting. Yes, it's a first-person shooter, and yes, the consoles are completely saturated by these, but this straight away looks like this is something different. This is something special. This is something that's trying things that other games aren't, and that's what excites me.
I think what I really liked about it, just joining in on that, Dan, was the whole public event thing. So you and your buddies can be doing like an adventure or campaign mode, the three of you, and then you can just happen upon a public event that the games makers have instigated in the network worldwide, and you can choose whether to opt into that or not. So there's that great feeling that, yes, you're playing a game that you're sharing with your friends, and it's very kind of secluded, and it's your own kind of thing, but you can, if you want to, opt into the real world. It does feel like it's a landscape that you're visiting rather than something that's housed solely in this black box in front of you. That's something I quite like. So I'd be quite keen to see how Bungie are going to take that further.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to very quickly come back to another an older point that we were just talking about. More breaking news. Sony has just confirmed what Jack Tretton meant in his confirmation interview with G4 TV. They say, and I quote, that Jack's statements were, quote, referring specifically to playing used games online. The online pass for PlayStation first-party games will not continue on PlayStation 4. Similar to PlayStation 3, we will not dictate the online used game strategy, in brackets, the ability to play used games online, of its publishing partners. As announced last night, PlayStation 4 will not have any gating restrictions for used disc-based games. So effectively...
the last 20 minutes of this podcast.
We could just cut it out.
So effectively, what that means is there will potentially be restrictions if EA wanted to do things like online passes. So if you wanted to go and buy Skate 4... please let that be in development, and there be online passes for it. If there is an online pass for it and you take that game and you trade it in and somebody else gets it, they won't have that online pass, and that'll be down to EA essentially dictating whether or not they want you to play online. Sony, however, if you get Killzone, trade that in, and that person wants to that buys it secondhand wants to play it online, they will be able to, because Sony will be getting rid of that and will not be touching like online passes.
So the onus is still on the developer.
So the onus is still on the developer, but only for online multiplayer.
So that changes nothing to the current gen. And I'm fine with the online passes. I understand.
I might have to get you to write that down for me.
I understand that basically... Sorry, I just got a phone call. It's my mum.
That's going to make it into this podcast.
Don't put it in there.
Stop it.
I'm going to add it to the authors list.
I think it's...
Good, I'm glad. This is still going in. We're still rolling.
Yeah, you can cut it out. No, I think because at the moment with the games that they are, I've got no problem with an online pass. As I said earlier when we were talking about it, when Sony perhaps were going to have a bit more influence on the pre-owned market. I don't mind paying extra if that money's going for the money to go to a developer, because I understand that by buying pre-owned, yes, I'm getting it cheaper, but the developer who has put their time and money and effort into making the game is getting nothing from that. And I can understand them wanting something from that. So that doesn't bother me. And online passes have never bothered me. It's an inconvenience, and it's a little bit annoying. It's always nice when you buy a pre-owned game with an online pass and you open it and you find that the online pass hasn't actually been used yet. That's always a good thing. But this doesn't bother me. I'm more than happy because I'm comfortable with the system as it is now, and the fact that they're not changing that. And it's great that Sony themselves are removing it, because a lot of the great games of the PlayStation 3 have been Sony games.
Agreed.
And so that's moving forward. So the great games, they're not going to have any restrictions. Hopefully, anyway, the great games going forward. So no, I've got no problem with that, and I support that.
Good stuff. Let's try and round this podcast off before Jack Tretton changes his mind anymore.
You haven't mentioned the price.
I'm about to mention the price, Mr. Daniel Frost.
Well, I thought you were saying goodbye.
This also will make it. So, PlayStation 4 is going to cost you £349 or €399 or $399. That is significantly less.
That is massive.
Sort of recapping from yesterday, $499 I think it is for an Xbox One, $399 for PlayStation 4. There is a very snarky little image floating about the internet at the moment basically saying for $499 you get a system that is going to check that you're not pirating games every 24 hours, won't let you have secondhand game sales, XYZ, and Sony's is cheaper and doesn't do any of that sort of stuff. So, seek that out. Why not? That's quite tempting. Like, £349 is still an absolute rip-off in comparison to $399, but the shafting feels less significant. £349 is still coming up on $500, which is about $100 more than the Americans will be paying. But £349 in itself, sort of taking that out of the equation, that's doable. And
I think with Xbox, once you push, and I think PlayStation 3 fan as well, once you push past that 400 mark, there's like a threshold that that's too high.
When you are $1 away from half of $1,000, like when you are half $1 away from $1,000, that's quite a lot of money. And even though, in the grand scheme of things, for as long as you'll probably have these systems, this generation, if we think the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 generation has been long, you wait. This is going to be an even longer one. There are not going to be any companies that want to take any more risks on hardware for a very long time after this. So the actual investment, you might want to see this as an investment, but I think £349 is still a lot of money. It's not money I've just got sitting in my back pocket, but that to me makes more of a value proposition than an Xbox. There you go. That's my opinion.
I mean, Jack Tretton's face was the epitome of smug when he said that.
He really was.
Because the crowd just basically exploded. It was like he was playing an arena.
Jack and the UK guy who gave us all of the prices. I can never remember the name of the UK guy. But, those two guys, I think they knew that they were onto a bit of a winner with this. I think Sony were lucky to go second, and they saw what Microsoft had up their sleeves. We touched on this earlier. Like, who knows how much they reacted to what happened earlier. But you've got to think, like, if this is genuinely and always was their strategy moving forward, you get the feeling that they've got their heads firmly on their shoulders. It's £349 in an economic recession is doable, I would argue.
I mean, for me, as I said yesterday as well, I'm not going to be looking to purchase one of these consoles probably until next year and maybe next Christmas. So I'm going to be looking at price drops as well. So for me, looking at PlayStation 4, the price drop on that, and after the price drop of Xbox One, that's still going to be a high cost. So for me, they basically ticked every single box, Sony have. And I'm really surprised. I imagined them basically falling in line with each other, and they haven't. They've really, really taken a step up and said, actually, no, we're going to do this, and this is our business plan. And I'm very impressed with Sony, I think.
What console do you think you'd get, P, out of the two now you've seen them?
I have. You see, it's difficult.
You've got a Vita, haven't you?
You see, it's difficult. I've got two. It's difficult for me to say because, obviously, as somebody who this is my job, you have to be kind of seen to be objective. So it's always difficult when people come up and say, it's the same for both of you as well. We are reporting on the games industry in some way. It would be good if we could be objective, and I do think that that people do have their own personal preferences, and my personal preferences have always sort of pushed more towards PlayStation ever since basically post Super Nintendo. I've always kind of moved more towards PlayStation. So I think it's a little bit unsurprising that I'm more sort of, I think the first of these that I'll be getting will be the PlayStation 4. I'm really keen to see what Xbox One has to offer going down the line, because Project Gotham Racing Forza looks absolutely fantastic. I think that looks ace, actually. I was kind of thinking about this a little bit after our call last night, and I think that the new Halo is going to be great. I love Halo Reach's online. Admittedly, I haven't played 4, but Halo Reach's multiplayer is amazing. I think that Microsoft has got some great franchises. I'm really keen to see what Killer Instinct will do now that it's going free to play, apparently.
Well, apparently, isn't it free to play, but then you have to purchase the characters? Or
yeah. It's freemium. So yeah. I'm really interested to see what those do, and I think, as a, red-blooded video game journalist, I will go and buy an Xbox One at some point. But I think for my first entry into this next generation, it's not going to be a Microsoft console. It's not going to be a Nintendo console. I think it's going to have to be a Sony console. So that's kind of where I'm at. And Kris, you're still sort of marveling at the PlayStation 3. There's a fair amount here. There was a fair amount at this conference for you. It's clear that you've got at least another, I would say, probably about 12 months of brand new releases of things to be looking forward to. At least another 12 months.
And then you can start on the back catalogue.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you pleased with this? And are you considering moving on up to a PlayStation 4?
I think I'm definitely pleased with this. I mean, my highlights actually in terms of games of the entire presentation were actually the PS3 games, which were, The Last of Us, Rain, as Dan's already mentioned, Beyond Two Souls, because it had that Metal Gear Solid vibe, Beyond Two Souls, which I wasn't expecting from all the trailers we've seen prior to that. But PlayStation 4, I think I've always been, as I said on the Xbox show yesterday, I've always been a Sony person, a bit like you, Pete. I've never really took to the Xbox, and this has really just confirmed it for me, really. I know a lot of people on the internet have been saying that Xbox had good games, but a really rubbish kind of architecture surrounding that and a game plan, whereas Sony had the reverse. I disagree. I think Sony have given us some solid games. Maybe not dazzling as the Xbox that we saw, but they've given us some solid titles here, and I'm looking forward to see how these will develop further as we get through the new console.
Absolutely.
I think with the Sony games that they showed, I think a lot of maybe the sniffiness about it is the fact that they showed a lot of games we've already seen before and a lot of third-party stuff, the likes of Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed and Batman Arkham Origins. It's just stuff we already know about, already seen. We're not seeing anything new. I mean, for me, you guys say you have kind of a preference. I don't really have a preference. I know Sam always thinks of me as like an Xbox person, but Xbox 360 was actually the first time I've gone consecutive consoles under the same company, Xbox to Xbox 360. Before then, I went from Mega Drive to PlayStation to Dreamcast, to Xbox, then to Xbox, then to Xbox 360, and now the PlayStation 3. So I have shared all of them. Don't get me wrong, if Sega bring out another console, I'll be buying that one. If the Dreamcast 2 comes out, then don't get me wrong, but get your Xbox One and PlayStation 4, I am buying it. Shenmue 3.
Yeah, exactly. Shenmue 3 launch game. I think you're right. I think, we all have our preferences, and I think to deny that would be ridiculous. We do all have our own personal preferences, and I'm personally sort of, to go off on a bit of a tangent, I am personally really proud of the fact that everybody in retrospect, we do have our own personal preferences, but we do also have the sort of reservation to sort of say, it's not just about PlayStation, it's not just about Xbox, it's not just about Nintendo. It's not just about gaming on a PC or a mobile phone or a tablet. It's about games. It's regardless of platform, it's about playing those video games. We on Free Play, for example, we've played games that have been on PlayStation, we've played games that have been on PC and on Facebook and on mobiles. We're quite platform agnostic, but I do feel like we do have our own personal preferences, which brings a nice little mix to the proceedings. So I think the one thing I kind of, want to take away from the PlayStation thing is, I think I'm in again as a Sony consumer. I think I'll be giving them my money again for this console. And that's great. And I think it would be really interesting to see where the market goes from here. So I think we'll kind of wrap things up. Dan, you're the keeper of the schedule. what we're recording next for one of these in retrospect shots. We're going to do a sort of post E3 roundup, aren't we?
We are. We've got one more of our E3 specials in retrospect shots to come.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's going to be myself, yourself, Mr. Kris, and also we are, I think, welcoming back Mr. Turner.
Oh, Mr. Turner.
Which will be fun. So yeah, that's coming out in the next couple of days once we've all gathered together all the information of all the E3 goodies. Yeah, that'll be heading into people's ears shortly.
Ooh, I'm very, very excited. And I think we'll probably do a few more of these in retrospect shots. Oh, a bit of a tease there for everybody. Maybe we'll be doing a bit more of this stuff. If you do like this sort of a thing, then let us know. You can come find us on InRetrospectPodcast.com. There's all sorts of information on there as to how to get in touch, including Twitter.com/InRetroSpect. That is the InRetrospect gremlin, and he's our sort of customer services representative, if you like. He has been live blogging all of the E3 stuff, and it's been really quite entertaining to watch him break down. Facebook.com is a social media website where all of your friends that you don't talk to that often are. You can search for In Retrospect Podcast in the search bar and find us and like us on there, and you'll never miss out basically on when the next podcast goes up. Make sure that you're subscribed on iTunes, and if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us but you don't want to give us any money, that's fine, because we don't ask for any money. Give us a review and a rating. 5 stars would be quite nice, and let us know what you like. And there's all sorts of other things. Like I say, in retrospectpodcast.com, you can find all the information and even more great content from In Retrospect on that lovely website. Guys, it's been good. I've enjoyed myself.
I'm very excited about the next generation of consoles.
I'm very excited as well, and we'll think more, we'll talk more even on the next episode of In Retrospect Shots. And thank you guys for joining me, and listeners, thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.
Ta-ra.